Hare Krishna, welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. Before we start today's Srimad Bhagavatam class, let's do a simple Mangala Charana. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaim Narottamam Deving Saraswating Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the only means of conquest, let us offer our respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana, onto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, onto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and onto Srila Vyasadeva, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam. Nasta Paresha Vidareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavadi Naistikihi. By regularly attending Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the lotus feet of pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely vanquished, and loving devotional service onto the lotus feet of Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs and choice poetry, is established in one's heart as an irrevocable fact. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jnana Salakaya Chaksuramritanyana Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master illuminated my heart with the torch of transcendental knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Nama Om Vishnuvadaya Krishna Parasthaya Putale Srivite Japataka Swamiti Namni Nama Acharipita Nitai Kripavidayane Gorakadzadam Daidaramtani Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Sri Basadi Gaura Bhaktavranda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome everyone to today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 20, chapter entitled The Pure Devotional Service Surpasses Knowledge and Detachment. So before we start this class, I would like to say that this chapter reminds me of Chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. Here Krishna speaks about loving devotional service, and this chapter actually literally melted my heart because it showed that Krishna is so merciful unto all living entities, and it's also very, very heartwarming since the desire of Krishna to see his devotees progress in spiritual life is unsurpassed. So before we start anything, let's just read this chapter 1 to chapter 20, text 1 to text number 5. Sri Uddhava said, "My dear lotus eye Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord, and thus the Vedic literatures, consisting of positive and negative injunction, constitute your order. Such literatures focus upon the good and the bad qualities of work. According to Vedic literatures, the superior and inferior varieties found in the human social system, varṇāśrama, are due to pious and sinful modes of family planning. Thus, piety and sin are constant points of reference in the Vedic analysis of the components of a given situation, namely the material ingredient, place, age, and time. Indeed, the Vedas reveal the existence of material heaven and hell, which are certainly based on piety and sin. Without seeing the difference between piety and sin, how can one understand your own instructions in the form of Vedic literatures, which order one to act piously and forbid one to act sinfully? Furthermore, without such authorized Vedic literatures, which ultimately award liberation, how can human being achieve the perfection of life? My dear Lord, in order to understand these things beyond direct experience, such as spiritual liberation or attainment of heaven and other material enjoyments beyond our present capacity, and in general to understand the means and the end of all things, the forefathers, the demigods, the human beings must consult the Vedic literatures, which are your own laws, for these constitute the highest evidence and revelation. My dear Lord, the distinction observed between piety and sin come from you, from your own Vedic knowledge, and does not arise by itself. In the same Vedic literatures subsequently nullify such distinction between piety and sin. There will certainly be confusion. So here Uddhava is asking a very, very important question, but not in a very direct way. It's very complicated, sounds very complicating. But actually what Uddhava is asking is actually something very, very important. He is saying that the Vedic literatures are full of rituals and of pious activities and injunctions to inform everyone who read the Vedas to avoid sinful activities. So these Vedic literatures are full of pious and impious instructions. So Uddhava is saying these pious and impious instructions, they do not give one the perfection of human life. They do not really solve any problem. So the evidence of this is in Bhagavad Gita. In Bhagavad Gita, if you read, the plot of Bhagavad Gita is Arjuna did not want to perform his duty to fight and kill his relations. So in support of that, Arjuna, for the second half of chapter 1 in Bhagavad Gita, he gave so many evidence from Vedas only, from Dharma-shāstra only, why he should not perform his duties. Yet after giving all this evidence from Vedas, his problems is not solved. So it culminated in chapter 2 text 7, whereby Arjuna declares to Krishna that I do not know how to solve my own problem. I do not know what is the real answer. I do not know what's right. I do not know what's wrong. I am a disciple surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So that is the beginning of spiritual life. That is the beginning of the spiritual instruction in Bhagavad Gita. So here Uddhava is asking that these Vedic literatures are full of this kind of instruction. How are we supposed to understand that these instructions actually come from Krishna himself? At the same time, they do not give the instructions, very clear instructions by Krishna that solves the problems of life. Same situation also was there for our author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, in Canto 1, in one whole chapter. There Vyasadeva declares to his spiritual master Narada Muni that after writing all the Vedic literatures, he felt very unsatisfied. Why? Because he did not touch upon the real message of Krishna in all his literatures. Therefore, under the instruction of his spiritual master, Srila Vyasadeva began to write Srimad Bhagavatam. And only after writing Srimad Bhagavatam, which actually is the declaration of Krishna's loving devotional service, the whole science of devotional service is declared there. Only then Srila Vyasadeva felt satisfied. So let's listen to Krishna's answer. Text number 6. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Uddhava, because I desire that human beings may achieve perfection, I have presented 3 paths of advancement: the path of knowledge, the path of work, and the path of devotion. Besides these 3, there is absolutely no other means of elevation. So here Krishna, very interestingly, he wants to tell us the point of what he is going to talk about. The point that he's going to talk about is that the best method for one to achieve perfection in life is only comes through in three methods according to Krishna. It comes first through jnana, knowledge. Number 2, it comes through work, karma yoga, and of course the ultimate perfection is through devotional service. Okay. So he's saying here that one cannot progress along any one of these paths without the blessing of the Lord. Other Vedic processes such as austerity, charity, so forth are included within the 3 primary divisions described here. One cannot achieve the same results by mere speculation or piety than one achieves by directly surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, depending completely on His mercy and friendship. So Krishna is saying here that the devotional service is the ultimate perfection of human life. Philosophical speculation and regulated pious work can never be considered equal to pure love of Godhead. That is the main point here. All the processes that we come across in our Vedic literatures, they are for the purpose of stepping stone to achieve pure loving devotional unto Him. The process of jnana or knowledge, one seeks impersonal liberation by merging into the glaring effulgence of the personality of Godhead. Such liberation is considered hellish by devotees because by merging one loses all awareness of the supreme blissful feature of the Lord Bhagavan. So here this Krishna is emphasizing the fact that if you were to pursue only strictly this jnana, this pursuit of knowledge, the tendency of those pursuing this line is that they tend to become impersonal. So that is not recommended by Krishna. Text number 7. Among these three paths, jnana, the path of philosophical speculation, is recommended for those who are disgusted with material life and are thus detached from ordinary fruitive activities. Those who are not disgusted with material life, having many desires yet to fulfill, should seek perfection through the path of karma yoga. So here, those who are still desirous of enjoying material life cannot take directly to the path of the rigorous philosophical advancement which requires great austerity. They still must remain in family life and offer the fruits of their work to the Supreme. In this way, they also can become perfect and gradually learn detachment from material life. Text number 8. If somehow or other, by good fortune, one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted with or nor attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. So here Krishna is saying a first class candidate for pure devotional service, on the other hand, is neither completely disgusted with nor attached to material life. A person who avoids the two extremes of material attachment and impersonal reaction to material attachment, and who somehow or other gets the association of pure devotees faithfully hearing their message, is a good candidate for going back home, back to Godhead, as described here by the Lord. So this idea that we should hate material world, we should hate this, hate that, is actually not supported here. The Krishna is saying here that you neither are disgusted, you neither hate nor you are attached to material life. You must be neutral. You don't have any opinion on all these things that we consider as obstacles. Text number 9. As long as one is not satiated by fruitive activities and has not awakened his taste for devotional service by Sravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu, one has to act according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunction. So, unless one has developed firm faith in Lord Krishna by association with his pure devotee and is thus engaged full-time in devotional service of the Lord, one should not neglect ordinary Vedic principles and duties. Srila Jiva Goswami points out in this regard that when a person fully surrenders to Lord Krishna, he takes shelter of the Lord's promise to liquidate all other responsibilities and debts of the surrendered soul. The devotees thus become fearless by meditating on the Lord's promise of protection. Those, however, who are materially attached are frightened by the prospects of full surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, thereby revealing their inimical mentality towards the Lord. Therefore, for such devotees, they should continue to perform their duties according to their varna and asrama. Text number 10. This verse is interesting because it defines what is Akama. Okay, my dear Uddhava, a person who is situated in his prescribed duty, properly worshipping by Vedic sacrifice, but not desiring the fruitive results of such worship, will not go to the heavenly planets. Similarly, by not performing forbidden activities, he will not go to hell. So here, the perfection of karma yoga is described. One who does not desire fruitive rewards for his religious activities does not waste time going to heavenly planets for celestial sense gratification. Similarly, one who does not neglect his prescribed duties or perform forbidden activities will not be bothered by going to hell for punishment. Thus, avoiding material reward and punishment, such a desireless person can be promoted to the platform of pure devotional service to Lord Krishna. Text number 11. One who is situated in his prescribed duty, free from sinful activities and cleansed of material contamination, in this very life obtains the transcendental knowledge, or by fortune devotional service unto me. So here in the purport it is explained, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, through transcendental knowledge one obtains liberation, whereas through pure devotional service one can achieve love of Godhead, in which liberation is automatically included. Both results are certainly superior to ordinary fruitive activities, by which one tries to enjoy much the same thing that animals do. If one's devotional service is mixed with a tendency towards fruitive activities or mental speculation, then one may achieve a neutral stage of love of Godhead, whereas those who are inclined to serve only Lord Krishna advance to the highest stage of love of Godhead in servitude, friendship, parental love, and conjugal relationship. Text number 12. The residents of both heaven and hell desire human birth on earthly planet because human life facilitates the achievement of transcendental knowledge and love of Godhead, whereas neither heavenly nor hellish bodies effectively provide such an opportunity. So here, heaven and hell, one becomes absorbed in extraordinary sense gratification, and in hell one is absorbed in suffering. In both cases there is little impetus, little opportunity to acquire transcendental knowledge and pure love of Godhead. Excessive suffering or excessive enjoyment are thus impediments to spiritual advancement. So even devas in the heavenly planet, their ambition is to take birth on earth, to acquire a human body. Why? Because it just explained here that this human body awards one the opportunity to acquire transcendental knowledge, which gives them liberation, or to get love of Godhead. That is the perfection of human life. Prema Puman Artho Mahan. The perfection of human life is when one acquires love of Godhead. Text number 13. A human being who is wise should never desire promotion to heavenly planets or residence in hell. Indeed, a human being should also never desire permanent residence on earth, for by such absorption in the material body, one becomes foolishly negligent of one's actual self-interest. Text number 14. A wise person, knowing that although the material body is subject to death, it can still award the perfection of one's life, should not foolishly neglect to take advantage of this opportunity before death arrives. Text number 15. Without attachment, a bird gives up the tree in which his nest was constructed when that tree is cut down by cruel men who are like death personified, and thus the bird achieves happiness in another place. Text number 16. Knowing that one's duration of life is being similarly cut down by the passings of days and night, one should be shaken by fear. In this way, giving up all material attachment and desire, one understands the Supreme Lord and achieves perfect peace. So here, Krishna is giving an analogy of a bird who builds a nest in the tree, and after the tree being cut down and his home lost, this bird just moves to another tree and builds another nest. So this is the attitude of a elevated living entity. They do not consider this material world a place to live in, and they understand that this is not our home. So an intelligent devotee knows that passing day and night are exhausting his duration of life, and therefore his futile attachment to material sense object makes no sense. Instead, he strives to achieve permanent benefit in life, Just as the detached bird immediately gives up its nest and goes to another tree, similarly, a devotee knows that there is no permanent opportunity for residence within the material world. Instead, he dedicates his working energy to achieve eternal residence in the kingdom of God. Transcending the mode of material nature by attaining Krishna's own spiritual nature, the devotees at last obtain perfect peace. Text number 17. The human body, which can award all benefits in life, is automatically obtained by the laws of nature, although it is very rare achievement. This human body can be compared to a perfectly constructed boat having the spiritual master as the captain and the instruction of the personality of Godhead as favorable winds impelling it on its course. Considering all these advantages, a human being who does not utilize his human life to cross the ocean of material existence must be considered the killer of his own soul. Text number 18. A transcendentalist, having become disgusted and hopeless in all endeavors for material happiness, completely controls the senses and develops detachment. By spiritual practice, he should then fix the mind on spiritual platform without deviation. Text number 19. Whenever the mind, being concentrated on the spiritual platform, is suddenly deviated from its spiritual position, one should carefully bring it under the control of the self by following the prescribed means. Text number 20. One should never lose sight of the actual goal of mental activities, but rather conquer the life air and senses, and utilizing intelligence strengthened by the mode of goodness, one should bring the mind under the control of the self. So here now Krishna is giving very useful, very helpful instruction by telling us that if one is too austere or too sensuous, one cannot control the mind. This is one very good tip here. Then he goes on to explain that although the mind may suddenly wander outside the jurisdiction of self-realization, one must bring the mind back under control by clear intelligence in the mode of goodness. The best solution is to keep the mind always busy in the service of Lord Krishna, so that the mind cannot wander onto the dangerous path of sense gratification, headed by sex attraction. The material mind is naturally inclined to accept material objects at every moment. Therefore, unless the mind is seriously brought under control, there is no possibility of becoming steady on the path of spiritual advancement. Text number 21. An expert horseman, desiring to tame a headstrong horse, first lets the horse have his way by a moment, and then, pulling the reins, gradually places the horse under the desired path. Similarly, the Supreme Yoga process is that by which one carefully observes the movement and desire of the mind and gradually brings them under full control. So here is a very nice example Krishna is giving of a expert horseman. Expert horsemen are those who expertly tame the horse. Horses are by nature very wild. So similarly, our mind also is compared to like a horse. So the technique the expert horseman uses is, first the horseman will give the horse freedom to do what it likes. It does what it does. He run here, run there, does this, does that. And an expert yogi is just like this expert horseman. No? He will observe. He will observe the mind. He will observe the desires, and by observing, he begin to understand. Oh, this is the weakness. This is the weakness of the mind. This is the weakness of the desires. And by such observation and by such intelligence, he slowly controls the mind and brings it under control. Text number 22. Until one's mind is fixed in spiritual satisfaction, one should analytically study the temporary nature of all material objects, whether cosmic, earthly, or atomic. One should constantly observe the process of creation through the natural progressive function and the process of annihilation through the regressive function. Text number 23. When a person is disgusted with the temporary, illusory nature of this world and is thus detached from it, his mind, guided by the instruction of his spiritual master, considers again and again the nature of this world, and eventually gives up the false identification with matter. So this is another very, very important instruction. Although it is difficult to control the mind, by constant practice, the mind can be spiritualized in Krishna consciousness. A sincere disciple constantly remembers the instruction of his spiritual master, and thereby face again and again the stark truth that the material world is not the ultimate reality. By detachment and perseverance, the mind gradually gives up its propensity towards sense gratification. Thus, illusion loses its grip on a sincere Krishna conscious devotee. Gradually, the purified mind completely gives up the false identification with this world and transfers his attention to the spiritual platform. Then one is considered to be a perfect in the yoga system. Text number 24. Through the various disciplinary regulations and the purificatory process of yoga system, through logic and spiritual education, or through worship and adoration of me, one should constantly engage his mind in remembering the personality of Godhead, the goal of yoga. No other means should be employed for this purpose. So, one engaged in the worship and adoration of the personality of Godhead need not trouble himself with disciplinary regulations and purificatory process of yoga, nor with the grueling intricacies of Vedic studies and logic. The most appropriate object of meditation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as confirmed throughout the Vedic literatures. One who directly takes to the worship of the Lord should not employ other methods, for full dependence on the Lord is in itself the supreme process of perfection. Bhakti-yoga, text number 25. If because of momentary inattention a yogi accidentally commits an abominable activity, then by the very practice of yoga, he should burn to ashes the sinful reaction without at any time employing any other process. So this verse here reminds me of another verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 30. Api chet su duracharo bhajante mam ananyabhak sadur eva sa mantavya samyak vyasito hisa. If one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. The most important point here is that one should properly engage in devotional service of the Lord, for then the Lord will excuse and purify any accidental fall down. One should, however, be most cautious to avoid such an unhappy event. So here the sin, the accidental, the abominable activity that is mentioned here is referring to accidental fall down against one's desire. Intentional exploitation of the mercy of the Lord can never be excused. There is no excuse for doing something intentionally sinful. Significantly, the Lord forbids any extraneous purificatory rites, since the Transcendental Yoga system of Bhakti-yoga are themselves the most purifying process. So there is no need for any other process. I see a lot of neophyte devotees, they become confused. They think other processes are just as powerful as Bhakti-yoga. Therefore, sometimes they make the mistake of stopping doing devotional service and taking on to some other process like, atonement and detachment and austerity and all that. But they don't realize that the most powerful process is devotional service itself. Text number 26. It is firmly declared that the steady adherence to transcendentalists to their respective spiritual position constitute real piety, and that sin occurs when a transcendentalist neglects his prescribed duty. One who adopts this standard of piety and sin, sincerely desiring to give up all past association with sense gratification, is able to subdue the material activities which are by nature impure. So again, Lord Krishna is making the same point. Lord Krishna here explains more clearly that those persons directly engaged in self-realization, either through jñāna-yoga or bhakti-yoga, need not give up their regular duties and perform special penance to atone for the accidental fall down. The actual purpose of Vedic literature is to direct one back home, back to Godhead. and not to encourage material sense gratification. Text number 27 and number 28. This is a jewel verse, so please listen carefully. Having awakened faith in the narration of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification lead to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he is sincerely repents such activities. So this is the verse that I'm saying, it's very heartwarming. Krishna knows me perfectly, despite, trying to perform devotional service. Krishna knows that a lot of his disciples are very much attached to sense gratification. And here he's saying, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. He says, go ahead and perform devotional service anyway. Don't worry about you're doing right or wrong. So this verse here actually explains the beginning stage of pure devotional service. So Krishna also explains that because of our past activities, because of our past attachments, it is not so easy to let go of some bad habits. So the real remedy, the real solution to our bad habits is devotional service. Just like we have lived our life and we have practiced bad habits, similarly by being very loyal to devotional service to Lord Krishna, what happens is we are developing new habits. Therefore, the association of devotees who are like-minded is very, very important for achieving this goal. And this verse is actually referring to karma yogis. Karma yogis here meaning those who have family members. So a pure devotee, he understands and feels spiritual affection for all living entities, including his wife, his husband, children. But he knows that material bodily attraction leads to no good, for it simply entangles one in one's so-called relatives in a miserable chain of reaction of fruitive activities. So pure devotees, they see even their relations as servants of Krishna. So they have compassion within their heart. They don't feel so much disgusted, but more compassion in their heart. That is the nature of devotional service. One should understand that because of his past sin, he must occasionally suffer disturbance from the material mind and senses. But one should not therefore become a devotee of detachment, as do the speculative philosophers. Although one may desire detachment to purify one's devotional service to the Lord, if one becomes more concerned with renunciation than with acting for the pleasure of Lord Krishna, he is misunderstanding the position of loving devotional service. Faith in Lord Krishna is so powerful that is in due course of time it will automatically award detachment and perfect knowledge. If one gives up Lord Krishna as some central object of one's worship and concentrate more on knowledge and detachment, one will become deviated from one's progress in going back home, back to Godhead. A sincere devotee of the Lord must be sincerely convinced that simply by strengthening of devotional service and the mercy of Lord Krishna, he will achieve everything auspicious in his life. One must believe that Lord Krishna is all merciful and that he is the only real goal of one's life. Such determined faith, combined with a sincere desire to give up sense enjoyment, will carry one past the obstacle of this world. By faithful hearing of the mercy and the glories of the Lord, one will gradually be freed from all material desires and clearly see at every moment the utter frustration of sense gratification. Chanting the glories of the Lord with firm faith and conviction is a tremendously powerful spiritual process that enables one to give up all material association. Text number 29. When an intelligent person engaged constantly in worshipping me through loving devotional service, as described by me, his heart becomes firmly situated in me. Thus all material desires within the heart are destroyed. Text number 30. The knot in the heart is pierced, all misgivings are cut to pieces, and the chain of fruitive action is terminated when I am seen as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here Krishna, he says that in illusion we imagine that the living entities cannot be fully satisfied without material sense gratification and speculative doubting of the absolute truth. But the reality is a pure devotee realizes that Lord Krishna is the ultimate ocean of happiness and the personification of all transcendental knowledge. Srila Prabhupada, he states that a devotee does not have to try separately to obtain liberation. That very service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the process of liberation. Because to engage oneself in the service of the Lord is to liberate oneself from material entanglement. So there's another quote here by Srila Bilba Mangala Thakur. If I have unflinching devotion onto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, then mukti or liberation serves me as my maidservant. Mukti, the maidservant, is always ready to do whatever I ask. For a devotee, liberation is no problem at all. Liberation takes place without separate endeavor. Text number 31. Therefore, for a devotee engaged in my loving service with mind fixed on me, the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation is generally not the means of achieving the highest perfection within this world. So here Krishna says a surrendered devotee does not seek perfection through the cultivation of knowledge and renunciation outside of loving service of the Lord. Devotional service to Lord Krishna, being itself the supreme transcendental process, never depends upon the secondary method involved in cultivation of knowledge and renunciation. So when a pure devotee service to the Lord is available to the conditioned soul, attraction to other processes is certainly a deviation in his devotional career. Material desires stubbornly residing within the heart can be vanquished by taking full shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without false confidence in one's own cultivation of knowledge and renunciation, one should depend fully on the mercy of Lord Krishna and at the same time strictly follow the rules and regulation of bhakti-yoga as instructed by Lord himself. Text number 32 and 33. Everything that can be achieved by fruitive activities, penance, knowledge, detachment, mystic yoga, charity, religious duties, and all other means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotees through loving service unto me. If somehow or other my devotees desire promotion to heaven, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benediction. Here Lord Krishna reveals the transcendental glories of devotional service. Although pure devotees are desireless, desiring only the Lord's service, sometimes a great devotee may desire the Lord's benediction to facilitate his loving service. An example here is in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is the story of Sri Chitraketu. Chitraketu desired promotion to the heavens so that, accompanied by the most attractive ladies of the Vindhyahara planet, he could beautifully chant the glories of the Lord. Similarly, Sukadeva Goswami of the great narrator of Srimad Bhagavatam, he desired to avoid being entangled in the illusory potency of this material world, and he would not come out of his mother's womb. In other words, Krishna personally sent the illusory energy far away so that Sukadeva Goswami could come out of his mother's womb, and because of intense loving desire to serve the lotus feet, a devotee may also desire promotion to the spiritual world. Thus, all devotees of the Lord, in whatever stage of advancement, should dedicate their energy exclusively to the Lord's service. There's a very nice verse in Canto 2. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udarati tivrena bhakti yogena yajatet purusha param. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he is full of material desires, without any material desires, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the Personality of Godhead, Lord Śrī Kṛṣṇa. Text number 34. Because my devotee possesses saintly behaviors and deep intelligence, they completely dedicate themselves to me and do not desire anything besides me. Indeed, even if I offer them liberation from birth and death, they do not accept it. So here, a pure devotee automatically gains an eternal life of bliss and knowledge in the Lord's personal abode, and thus considered mere liberation without the loving service of the Lord to be the most abominable thing, the most horrible existence. Every living entity is actually the eternal servant of Lord Krishna, and it's constitutionally meant to engage in the loving service of the Lord without personal desires. There's a very interesting verse also that is in the same spirit in Canto 6. It says there, whether a devotee, he is in heaven or in hell or in Vaikuntha, for such a devotee, it's all the same. Why? Because simply by serving the Lord, he is completely satisfied, completely happy. Text number 35. It is said that complete detachment is the highest stage of freedom. Therefore, one who has no personal desire and does not pursue personal reward can achieve loving devotional service unto me. So here, Krishna is explaining that in this age, most people are sarva-kama, or full of material desires. Still, we must understand that simply by taking shelter of Lord Krishna, we will achieve everything in life. The living entity should not engage in any process except the loving service of the Lord. One must accept that Lord Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and that only Lord Krishna within our heart can fulfill our real desires. This simple faith that one will achieve everything by approaching Lord Krishna is the essence of all knowledge, and carries even a fallen person over the painful hurdle of this difficult age. Text number 36. Material piety and sin, which arises from good and evil of this world, cannot exist within my unalloyed devotees who, being freed from material hankering, maintain steady spiritual consciousness in all circumstances. Indeed, such devotees have achieved me, the Supreme Lord, who am beyond anything that can be achieved and conceived by material intelligence. So here Krishna is explaining in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, Lord Krishna clearly explains that a pure devotee is recognized by complete detachment from personal desires, and therefore a pure devotee constantly engaged in selfless service to Lord Krishna may not always observe the innumerable details of Vedic rituals and regulation. Such occasional negligence is not to be considered a transgression. It is not considered a sin. Similarly, observance of ordinary material piety does not constitute the ultimate qualification of a soul surrendered to God. Okay, just because somebody is very pious doesn't mean he's surrendered to God. Love of Krishna and absolute surrender to the Lord will arise once immediately to the Transcendental platform, where activities performed on the Lord's behalf are absolute, being an expansion of the God's will. Ordinary material persons sometimes falsely claim this exalted status for their whimsical, immoral activities and cause a great disturbance in society. However, just as an ordinary person should not falsely claim the exclusive privilege of the personal assistance of a national leader, similarly, an ordinary conditioned soul may not foolishly claim that his immoral, whimsical or speculative activities are sheltered by the divine right, being the will of God. One must actually be a pure devotee of the Lord, empowered by the Lord himself, and completely surrendered to the will of the Lord before one may be accepted as a transcendental to ordinary piety in sin. There are cases of highly elevated devotees who momentarily fell down from the saintly platform of devotional service. The Lord instructs in Bhagavad Gita 9.30, a momentary fall down by a sincere devotee of the Lord cannot change the Lord's feeling towards a person. Even an ordinary father or mother quickly excuses a momentary transgression by their child. Just as children and parents enjoy mutual love, the Lord's surrendered servant enjoys a loving relationship with the Lord. An unpremeditated accidental fall down is quickly excused by the Lord, and all members of society must share in the Lord's own feeling, excusing such a sincere devotee. An advanced devotee should not be branded as materialistic or sinful because of accidental fall down. A devotee immediately returns to the platform of saintly service and begs the Lord's forgiveness. However, one who permanently remains in a fallen condition can no longer be accepted as a highly elevated devotee of the Lord. Text number 37. Persons who seriously follow this method of achieving me, which I have personally taught, attains freedom from illusion, and upon reaching my personal abode, they perfectly understand the absolute truth. So here we can see that Krishna is giving very, very good advice for all of us, that is very applicable to all of us, mainly all karmi yogis, neophyte devotees. So we should meditate upon these verses in this chapter entitled Pure Devotional Service. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.